Сценарист Юлія Яковенка. Кількість символів 93, ні 86. Назва. She said, I slept with your boss, so you can't touch me. I smiled. Perfect. But then, preview. She said, I slept with your boss, so you can't touch me. I smiled. Perfect. The HR report I filed the next morning made sure. Neither of them walked back in again. Story. The basement smelled like ozone and failure when I flipped the main breaker back on at 11:30 that Tuesday night. Funny how a blown fuse can tell you everything you need to know about your life. The house had been dark for 3 hours, just like my marriage had been dark for 3 months, though I'd been too stupid to notice until tonight. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is James Parish, but everyone calls me Jay. I'm 42 years old, and I own Parish Electrical with my business partner, Carl Morrison. We've been wiring houses and businesses in upstate New York for 15 years, and I thought I understood power. Turns out, I didn't understand the first damn thing about it. The front door slammed upstairs while I was still in the basement, checking the circuit panel. Beth was home early from her business trip to Albany. 3 days early, in fact. I heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floor above my head, that sharp staccato rhythm that used to make my heart race. Now it just made my jaw clench. I climbed the basement stairs slowly, savoring what I knew would be the last few seconds of my old life. The kitchen lights were blazing now, casting everything in that harsh fluorescent glare that makes everyone look guilty. Beth stood by the sink, her back to me, still wearing that black dress she'd bought for client meetings. Her auburn hair was mussed, her makeup smeared just enough to tell a story I didn't want to read. "Power go out?" she asked, without turning around. Her voice had that careful, controlled tone she used when she was lying. After 12 years of marriage, I knew all her tells. "Surge took out the main breaker around 8, I said, leaning against the door frame. Funny thing about surges, they happen when too much current flows through a system that can't handle it. She turned then, and I saw what I'd been expecting. Guilt written across her face like graffiti on a subway wall. Her lipstick was gone, her dress wrinkled in all the wrong places, and there was a hickey on her neck that she'd tried to cover with concealer. "You're home early," I said. "Meeting ended sooner than expected." The lie came so easily that I almost admired her for it. Almost. "Which meeting was that? The one with Greg Stanton?" Her face went pale under the kitchen lights. Greg Stanton was her boss at Morrison & Associates. No relation to my partner Carl. Greg ran the biggest commercial construction firm in the county, and he'd been mentoring my wife for 6 months. I'd thought it was professional development. Turns out it was just development. "How do you—" she started, then caught herself. "Jay, we need to talk." "Oh, we're way past talking, sweetheart." I pulled her burner phone from my pocket, the little silver flip phone she thought she'd hidden so well in her jewelry box. "But you're right about one thing. Greg did give you quite a performance review." The color drained from her face completely now. She looked like she might faint, which would have been poetic justice since I'd felt like fainting when I'd found the phone 3 hours ago. The text messages were explicit enough to make a sailor blush. And the photos, well, let's just say Greg was more creative than I'd given him credit for. "Jay, I can explain. Can you? Because I've been reading your messages for the past 3 hours, and I've got to say, your explanation better be pretty spectacular." I held up the phone, scrolling through the evidence. Here's my favorite. "Can't wait to get Jay out of the picture so we can be together properly." That's from last Tuesday, by the way, right after you told me you loved me and asked me to pick up dinner. Beth's composure cracked like an eggshell. "You had no right to go through my things." "I had no right," I laughed, and it came out bitter as black coffee. "Lady, I'm your husband, and you're sleeping with your boss in hotel rooms that you're charging to our joint credit card. I think my rights went out the window about the same time your panties did." She slapped me then, a sharp crack that echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. My cheek stung, but I just smiled. I'd been expecting that too. Feel better? I asked. Go to hell, Jay. Already there, thanks. But here's the thing about hell, it's got great cell phone reception. I waved the burner phone again. And according to these messages, you and Greg have been planning more than just afternoon quickies. You've been planning to push me out of my own company. That got her attention. The guilt in her eyes shifted to something else. Fear, maybe, or calculation. With Beth, it was always hard to tell the difference. That's not... Once Jay's reputation is damaged, the board will have to remove him, I read from the phone. Then we can merge Parish Electrical with Morrison and Associates, and you'll be the perfect inside person to make it happen smoothly. Did I get that right, honey? Because your spelling's gotten worse since you started thinking with your vagina. Beth straightened up, and I saw the mask slip back into place. This was the Beth I'd been married to for the last few years, cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. The woman I'd fallen in love with had died somewhere along the way, and I'd been too busy working to notice when they'd buried her. You want to know the truth, Jay? Fine. Yes, I'm sleeping with Greg. Yes, we're planning to merge the companies. And yes, we're going to push you out. But you know what? You did this to yourself. How do you figure that? You've been ignoring me for years, working 18-hour days, coming home covered in dirt and grease, falling asleep on the couch watching the game. When's the last time we went out to dinner? When's the last time you bought me flowers or told me I looked beautiful? When's the last time you acted like you wanted me to? She ignored that. Greg appreciates me. He sees my potential. He knows I'm worth more than being married to a glorified handyman who smells like electrical tape and WD-40. That stung more than the slap, but I kept my voice level. Glorified handyman, huh? This glorified handyman built a company worth $3 million. This glorified handyman bought you that Mercedes in the driveway and this house and every piece of jewelry in your collection. But you're right, Greg appreciates you. I can see exactly how much he appreciates you in these photos. You're disgusting. I'm disgusting. I'm not the one sending naked pictures to my boss while my spouse is working 16-hour days to pay for my lifestyle. I pocketed the phone. But here's the thing, Beth. You made one crucial mistake in your little plan. What's that? You forgot that I'm an electrician. I understand how power really works. I headed toward the kitchen door, then paused. Oh, and Beth? Tomorrow morning, you're going to find out what happens when someone tries to steal power from the wrong person. Sleep well. I left her standing in the kitchen, her mouth hanging open like a broken circuit breaker. Upstairs, I packed a bag and threw it in my truck. I wouldn't be coming home tonight, or any night for that matter. I had work to do. Mrs. Howland's curtains twitched in the window across the street as I loaded my truck. The old busybody had probably seen Beth come home and noticed her disheveled state. By morning, half the neighborhood would know something was up. That was fine with me. In fact, it was perfect. I drove to the Holiday Inn on Route 9, checked into a room, and spread the contents of Beth's burner phone across the desk. Photos, text messages, voicemails, even a few videos that made me want to throw the phone against the wall. But I didn't. Instead, I plugged it into my laptop and started making copies. By 3 a.m, I had everything backed up to 3 different cloud accounts, printed out the most damning messages, and compiled a timeline of the affair that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Not that I was planning to involve prosecutors. What Beth and Greg had done was morally reprehensible. But it wasn't criminal. Not yet, anyway. But I wasn't done gathering evidence. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I was at the Parish Electrical office by 6 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else would arrive. Our building sits on Industrial Drive, a long strip of warehouses and contractor offices that smell like coffee and diesel fuel in the morning. I love this place. The organized chaos of the supply room, the wall of certifications and licenses, the photos of every major job we'd completed over the past 15 years. Carl Morrison and I had built this company from nothing. We'd started in his garage with a pickup truck and a dream, and now we employed 37 people and grossed over $4 million a year. Parish Electrical had wired half the commercial buildings in the county, and our reputation was spotless. Beth and Greg wanted to destroy all of that so they could merge our client list with Morrison and Associates and cut me out entirely. They'd underestimated one crucial factor. I might be a glorified handyman, but I was also a paranoid glorified handyman who'd installed security cameras throughout the building after we'd had some equipment stolen 3 years ago. I went straight to my office and pulled up the security footage from the past month. It took me 2 hours to find what I was looking for, but there it was. Beth and Greg entering the building at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night 2 weeks ago using Beth's keycard. They'd spent 43 minutes in my office going through files, photographing documents, and copying information from my computer. I saved the footage to a thumb drive and kept searching. There were 3 more incidents over the past month, always late at night, always when they thought no one would notice. They'd been building a case against me, documenting every client complaint, every delayed payment, every minor safety violation. They were planning to present it to our board of directors and paint me as incompetent and reckless. The irony was delicious. While they'd been gathering evidence to destroy me, they'd been creating evidence that would destroy them. Carl arrived at 8, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the diner down the street. He's 55 years old, built like a linebacker, and has the kind of face that makes people trust him instantly. We'd been friends since high school, business partners for 15 years, and he was the closest thing I had to a brother. "You look like shit," he said, handing me a coffee. "Rough night?" "You could say that." I showed him the security footage. Carl watched in silence, his jaw getting tighter with each frame. When it was over, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "That cheating bitch." "It gets worse." I showed him the messages from Beth's phone. By the time I'd finished explaining the situation, Carl looked like he wanted to punch something. "So what's the plan?" "We're going to destroy them. Professionally, financially, and socially. We're going to make sure that when this is over, Greg Stanton couldn't get a job managing a McDonald's, and Beth couldn't get hired as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic." "I like it. What do you need me to do?" "First, we're changing all the passwords and security codes. Then we're moving our most important files to a secure server that only we can access. After that, we're going to start making some phone calls." We spent the morning locking down the company's digital assets and reviewing our client contracts. Parish Electrical had built its reputation on reliability and integrity, 2 qualities that Greg Stanton was about to discover he'd seriously underestimated. At lunch, I drove to Morrison and Associates to do a little reconnaissance. Their office building was one of those glass and steel monstrosities that screamed, "We're more important than you," from 3 blocks away. Greg's Mercedes was in the parking lot, right next to Beth's car in the visitors section. I parked across the street and called Beth's cell phone. "Jay, where are you? You weren't home last night." "I'm at a job site. We need to talk." "I'm at work. Can it wait?" "No, it can't. Meet me at Riverside Park at 5:30. Come alone." "Jay, I don't think—" 5:30, Beth. Don't make me come to your office." I hung up and called Greg's direct line. "Greg Stanton." "Mr. Stanton, this is Jay Parish from Parish Electrical. I think we need to discuss our mutual interest in my wife." There was a long pause. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. 5:30 at Riverside Park. Beth will be there and so will I. We're going to have a conversation about the future, yours, mine, and hers." "Are you threatening me?" "Not yet, but the day's young." I hung up and drove back to the office. Carl was waiting with a shit-eating grin on his face. "I made some calls," he said. "Turns out Greg Stanton has been having financial troubles. Morrison and Associates is leveraged up to their eyeballs, and they've got 3 major projects that are behind schedule and over budget. Word is, they're looking for a merger or acquisition to stay afloat. Interesting. What else? Your wife's been busy. She's been calling our clients, asking questions about their satisfaction with our work, hinting that there might be some changes coming to Parish Electrical. Mrs. Patterson from the school district called to ask if we were going out of business. Beth wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively sabotaging the company that paid for her lifestyle. Anything else? Yeah. Greg Stanton's been married for 18 years. His wife doesn't know about the affair. I smiled for the first time all day. What's her name? Linda Stanton. She's on the board of directors for the county hospital and chairs the annual charity auction. Very prominent in the social scene, very concerned about appearances. Perfect. Make me a copy of everything we've got. The photos, the messages, the security footage. I've got a presentation to prepare. At 5:15, I was sitting on a bench in Riverside Park with a manila envelope full of evidence and a digital recorder in my pocket. The park was busy with families and joggers, which was exactly what I wanted. Whatever happened next, I wanted witnesses. Beth arrived first, looking nervous and overdressed in a business suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. She sat down beside me without speaking, staring at the river like it held the answers to all of life's questions. Nice day, I said. Cut the shit, Jay. What do you want? I want my wife back. The one I married 12 years ago, before she turned into a lying, cheating, backstabbing corporate climber. That woman never existed. You just saw what you wanted to see. Greg arrived 10 minutes late, walking across the park like he owned it. He was wearing a $1,000 suit and a Rolex that cost more than most people's cars. Everything about him screamed money and power and entitlement. Jay, he said, extending his hand, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't shake his hand. The only misunderstanding is that you thought you could sleep with my wife and steal my company without consequences. Greg's face flushed red. Now see here. No, you see here. I pulled out the manila envelope. I've got photos, text messages, security footage, and a timeline that shows exactly what you two have been planning. I know about the late-night visits to my office, the client calls, and the merger discussions. I know everything. Beth grabbed my arm. Jay, please. Please what? Please pretend I don't know that my wife is a whore and my business partner's biggest competitor is trying to destroy me? Greg stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. You can't talk to her like that. I can talk to my wife however I want. But you're right. Soon she won't be my wife anymore. So it won't matter. What do you want? Greg asked. I want you to admit what you've been doing. Out loud. Right here. Right now. I'm not admitting anything. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of him and Beth in a hotel room, naked and tangled together like a pretzel. You want me to show this to your wife? Because I've got her phone number right here. Greg's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. Beth stood up suddenly. This is insane. Jay, you can't blackmail us. I'm not blackmailing anyone. I'm just sharing information. See, the thing about information is that it wants to be free. And I've got a lot of information that wants to be very, very free. What do you want? Greg asked again. I want you to leave my wife alone. I want you to stop trying to destroy my company. And I want you to admit out loud that you've been planning to merge Parish Electrical with Morrison and Associates after pushing me out. Greg looked at Beth, then back at me. And if I do that? Then maybe, I don't send copies of everything to your wife, your board of directors, and the local newspaper. You're bluffing. I pulled out another photo, this one showing Greg and Beth in his office after hours, going through what were clearly Parish Electrical documents. Am I? Greg's shoulders sagged. Fine. Yes, we've been having an affair. Yes, we discussed merging the companies, but it was just talk. Bullshit. You've been in my office 4 times in the past month, copying files and photographing documents. That's not talk, that's corporate espionage. It's not illegal. Maybe not. But it's sure as hell unethical. And when your clients find out that you've been stealing information from your competitors, how do you think that's going to affect your reputation? Beth was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks like black rain. Jay, please, we can work this out. No, we can't. You made your choice when you decided to sleep with him. You made your choice when you decided to destroy the company I built. Now you get to live with the consequences. I stood up and handed Greg the manila envelope. Everything's in there. Photos, messages, security footage, financial records showing how you've been using company funds to pay for hotel rooms. I've got copies of everything, stored in multiple locations. If you come after me or my company again, it all goes public. You can't prove. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to create reasonable doubt about your character and competence. In a small town like this, reputation is everything, and yours is about to become very, very complicated. I walked away, leaving them sitting on the bench like two kids who'd been caught shoplifting. Behind me, I could hear Beth sobbing and Greg trying to calm her down. It was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. But I wasn't done, not even close. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room with a plan that would have made Machiavelli proud. Beth and Greg thought they could destroy me with rumors and innuendo? Fine. Two could play that game, and I had home field advantage. I started with Mrs. Howland, the neighborhood gossip who'd been watching my house like a hawk for the past 5 years. I knocked on her door at 8 a.m. with a cup of coffee and a sad expression. "Oh, Jay," she said, opening the door in her bathrobe. "I heard Beth came home the other night looking, well, not quite herself." "I was hoping we could talk, Mrs. Howland. I'm going through a difficult time, and I could use some advice from someone with your wisdom and experience." She practically dragged me into her kitchen. Within 10 minutes, I'd told her a carefully edited version of the truth. Beth was having an affair with her boss. They were trying to steal my company, and I was heartbroken but determined to protect what I'd built. "That little hussy," Mrs. Howland declared, slamming her coffee cup down so hard I thought it might break. I knew something was wrong when I saw her sneaking around at all hours, and that fancy car that's been parked across the street twice a week, I bet that was him. "I don't want to cause any trouble," I said, playing the wounded husband to perfection. "I just want to protect my employees and my company." By 10 a.m., Mrs. Howland had called 6 of her friends. By noon, half the neighborhood knew that Beth Parish was cheating on her husband with her boss and trying to steal his business. The gossip network in a small town is more efficient than the internet and twice as vicious. Next, I drove to the Current, the bar where most of the local contractors hung out after work. It was early, but Tommy the bartender was there setting up for lunch. Tommy had worked construction before a back injury forced him behind the bar, and he knew everyone in the business. "Jay, haven't seen you in a while. The usual?" "Just a coffee, Tommy. I'm having a rough week." "Yeah? What's going on?" I told him the story, adding just enough detail to make it interesting without being crude. Tommy listened with the focused attention of a man who understood that information was currency in a small town. "Greg Stanton's been sniffing around your business? That son of a bitch. I heard Morrison and Associates is in trouble, behind on 3 major projects and bleeding money. Makes sense he'd want to steal your client list." "I just hope I can protect my employees. Some of these guys have been with me for 10 years. "Don't worry about that, Jay. Everyone knows you run a clean operation. Stanton's got a reputation for cutting corners and screwing over subcontractors. Nobody's going to choose him over you." By closing time, every contractor, electrician, and construction worker in the county would know that Greg Stanton was trying to destroy Parish Electrical through underhanded tactics. In a business built on trust and reputation, that was the kiss of death. My next stop was the bank. Parish Electrical did business with First National, and I'd known the branch manager, Susan Martinez, for 8 years. She was professional, discreet, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting the bank's interests. "Jay, good to see you. What can I do for you today?" I need to discuss some changes to my business and personal accounts. I'm going through a divorce, and I want to make sure my company's assets are protected. Susan's expression turned serious. I'm sorry to hear that. What kind of protection are you looking for? I need to remove my wife's access to all business accounts immediately. I also want to freeze our joint personal accounts until the divorce is finalized. And I need to increase the security on all parish electrical accounts. I have reason to believe someone may have been accessing confidential information. That's a serious accusation. I showed her the security footage of Beth and Greg in my office. I have evidence that my wife and her associate have been gathering information about my business for their own purposes. I need to protect my company and my employees. Susan watched the footage twice, then made some notes. I'll have new account numbers and passwords set up by tomorrow morning. Your wife's access will be revoked immediately, and we'll flag all accounts for additional security monitoring. Thank you. There's one more thing. I'd like to request a credit report on Morrison & Associates. I'm considering some business opportunities, and I want to understand their financial situation. Susan smiled. I'll see what I can do. By 3 p.m., Beth's credit cards were frozen, her access to our accounts was revoked, and I had a complete picture of Morrison & Associates' financial troubles. They were worse off than Carl had indicated. The company was leveraged to the hilt and had missed payments on 2 major loans. Greg Stanton was desperate, which made him dangerous but also predictable. I was back at the office when my phone rang. It was Beth, and she was furious. What did you do to my credit cards? I protected my assets. You know, the assets you were planning to help Greg steal. You can't just freeze me out of my own accounts. Actually, I can. They're joint accounts, and I have every right to protect them during divorce proceedings. You should talk to a lawyer. Oh, wait. Lawyers cost money, and your credit cards don't work anymore. Jay, this is insane. We can work this out. No, we can't. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. Greg's gonna destroy you. He's got connections, resources. Greg's got debts, and a reputation that's about to become very complicated. But thanks for the warning. I hung up and called Carl. How are things at the office? Interesting. We've had 6 clients call today to confirm that we're not going out of business. Apparently, there are rumors going around that we're in financial trouble. Beth's been busy. What did you tell them? The truth. That we're financially solid and that any rumors to the contrary are being spread by competitors who are trying to steal our business. Most of them seemed satisfied, but a few want to meet in person. Set up the meetings. And Carl, make sure everyone knows that Greg Stanton is behind the rumors. I want his name associated with every underhanded tactic in the book. Already on it. I've been making some calls of my own. Turns out Greg's got a history of this kind of thing, trying to poach clients from competitors, spreading rumors, making promises he can't keep. A lot of people in the business don't trust him. Perfect. Keep digging. I want to know everything about Morrison & Associates, their finances, their projects, their problems. Knowledge is power, and I plan to be very powerful. That evening, I drove past my house to pick up some clothes and saw Greg's Mercedes in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see him and Beth having what looked like an intense conversation. Beth was gesticulating wildly, and Greg was shaking his head. I parked down the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Greg stormed out of the house, got in his car, and drove away fast enough to leave rubber on the pavement. Beth stood in the doorway watching him go, and even from a distance, I could see that she was crying. Trouble in paradise. Good. I waited another 10 minutes, then walked up to the front door and let myself in. Beth was in the living room, still crying, with a glass of wine in her hand that was definitely not her first. Having a rough night? I asked. She looked up, startled. Jay, I thought... Greg said you were trying to destroy us. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm just protecting what's mine. This is our home, our life. You can't just throw it all away because of a mistake. A mistake? Beth, you've been sleeping with your boss for months, planning to steal my company and actively sabotaging my business relationships. That's not a mistake. That's a hostile takeover. She set down her wine glass and tried to compose herself. Greg says you're bluffing. He says you won't really go public with the photos because it would hurt your own reputation. Greg's an idiot. My reputation can survive having an unfaithful wife. His reputation can't survive being exposed as a corporate spy and a homewrecker. He's not a homewrecker. Our marriage was already over. When? When did our marriage end, Beth? Because I seem to remember you telling me you loved me just last week. I remember you asking me to take you to dinner for our anniversary next month. If our marriage was over, you forgot to mention it. She didn't have an answer for that. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to move out of this house. You're going to stop interfering with my business, and you're going to stay away from me and my employees. In return, I won't send the photos to Greg's wife or the local newspaper. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed her a text message I'd already typed but not sent. It was addressed to Linda Stanton and included 3 of the most explicit photos from Beth's burner phone. Then Greg's marriage ends, his reputation is destroyed, and Morrison and Associates loses what little credibility it has left. Your choice. Beth stared at the phone, then at me. You've changed, Jay. You used to be a good man. I'm still a good man, but I'm not a stupid man anymore. There's a difference. I left her sitting in the living room and went upstairs to pack more clothes. When I came back down, she was gone. Her car was missing from the garage, and she'd taken her suitcase with her. I poured myself a beer and sat on the back porch, looking out at the garden Beth had planted 3 years ago. The roses were blooming, and the whole yard smelled like summer and possibility. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely wasted on a woman who'd thrown away everything good in her life for a few hours of excitement with her boss. But I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. I was planning my next move. Thursday morning brought the kind of rain that makes you want to stay in bed and pretend the world doesn't exist. I was at the office by 6:30, going through financial reports and preparing for what I knew would be a difficult day. Greg Stanton wasn't the type to take humiliation lying down, and I expected him to escalate things. I was right. At 8:15, Carl burst into my office with a grim expression. We've got problems. Someone called OSHA and reported safety violations on the Riverside Mall project. They're sending an inspector out this morning. What kind of violations? Improper electrical installations, inadequate safety protocols, unlicensed workers, basically everything they could think of. It's bullshit, but we'll have to shut down the job site until the inspector clears us. How much will that cost us? About $15,000 a day in penalties and lost productivity. If they find anything, even something minor, we could be shut down for a week. I felt my jaw clench. Greg's moving faster than I expected. What else? 3 more clients called this morning asking about the rumors. Someone's been telling people that Parish Electrical is under investigation for safety violations and financial irregularities. Same someone who called OSHA, I'd bet. All right, here's what we're going to do. Call every inspector, supervisor, and safety officer we've ever worked with. I want character references, safety records, and documentation of every clean inspection we've ever passed. When the OSHA guy shows up, I want him buried in paperwork that proves we run the cleanest operation in the county. Already started. Mike Henderson from the county building department is coming over at 10 with our complete inspection history. Says he's never seen a contractor with a cleaner record. Good. What about the Riverside Mall site? I've got our 3 best guys over there right now, going through everything with a fine-tooth comb. If there's so much as a loose wire or an improperly labeled circuit, they'll find it and fix it before the inspector arrives. The OSHA inspector showed up at 11:30. A thin, nervous man named Peterson, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He spent 3 hours going through our records, interviewing employees, and inspecting the job site. When he was finished, he looked genuinely confused. Mr. Parish, I have to say, this is one of the cleanest operations I've ever seen. Your safety protocols are exemplary, your workers are properly licensed and trained, and your installations meet or exceed all code requirements. Thank you. May I ask who filed the complaint? Anonymous tip. But between you and me, it sounded like someone with a personal grudge rather than a legitimate safety concern. I'll file my report today. You're cleared to resume work immediately. After Peterson left, I called a meeting with all my supervisors and foremen. These were good men who'd been with me for years, and they deserved to know what was happening. Gentlemen, as you know, we're under attack. A competitor is spreading rumors about our company and trying to damage our reputation. They've filed false reports with OSHA, they've been calling our clients with lies about our financial stability, and they've been trying to poach our workers with promises of higher wages. Who is it? Asked Mike Torino, my lead electrician. Greg Stanton at Morrison & Associates. He's desperate to steal our client list because his own company is failing. That son of a bitch, muttered Dave Walsh, one of my oldest employees. He tried to recruit me last month, offered me 20% more than I'm making here. When I told him I wasn't interested, he started asking questions about our current projects and client relationships. What did you tell him? Nothing. But he was fishing for information, that's for sure. All right, here's how we're going to handle this. First, if anyone from Morrison & Associates contacts you, don't talk to them. Refer them to me immediately. Second, if any of our clients ask about rumors, tell them the truth, that a failing competitor is spreading lies to try to steal our business. Third, I want everyone to document any contact with Morrison & Associates employees. If they're trying to steal proprietary information, I want evidence. What about Stanton himself? Asked Carl. Leave Greg Stanton to me. That afternoon, I put the next phase of my plan into action. I drove to the Marriott Hotel on Route 9, where Beth and Greg had been meeting for their afternoon encounters. I'd gotten the room numbers from Beth's text messages, and I had a pretty good idea of their schedule. I waited in the parking lot until I saw Greg's Mercedes pull in at 3:45. 5 minutes later, Beth's car arrived. They met in the lobby, Greg handed her a key card, and they went upstairs together. Room 247, just like the messages had indicated. I gave them 20 minutes to get settled, then called the front desk. Hi, this is Detective Morrison with the County Sheriff's Department. We've had reports of suspicious activity in room 247. Could you send security up to check on the situation? Suspicious activity? Possible drug transaction. We'd like hotel security to knock on the door and verify that everything is legitimate. If there's no problem, we'll call off our response team. Of course, Detective. We'll send someone up immediately. I hung up and waited. 10 minutes later, Greg and Beth came running out of the hotel like their asses were on fire. Beth was still buttoning her blouse, and Greg was carrying his shoes. They got in their separate cars and drove away without speaking to each other. I called the hotel back. This is Detective Morrison again. What did your security find? Nothing suspicious, Detective. Just a very embarrassed couple who claimed they were married but had different last names on their IDs. They left in quite a hurry. Thank you for your cooperation. It was a small victory, but it felt good. Greg and Beth would be paranoid about meeting in hotels now, which would complicate their relationship and make them more likely to make mistakes. My next stop was Morrison & Associates. I wanted to get a closer look at Greg's operation and maybe gather some intelligence about his financial situation. I parked across the street and watched the building for an hour, noting the comings and goings, the general activity level, the condition of the vehicles in the parking lot. What I saw confirmed what I'd already suspected. Morrison & Associates was in trouble. The parking lot was half empty at 4 in the afternoon, when it should have been full of workers returning from job sites. The few trucks I saw were older models, some with visible rust and damage. The building itself looked tired, with peeling paint and a parking lot that needed repaving. I was about to leave when I saw something interesting. Mark Kowalski, Greg's project manager, having what looked like a heated argument with another employee in the parking lot. Mark was gesticulating angrily, and the other man was shaking his head. When the argument ended, Mark got in his truck and drove away, leaving rubber on the pavement. Mark Kowalski had worked for Parish Electrical 5 years ago, before Greg had recruited him with promises of more money and advancement opportunities. He was a good worker and a decent man, but he'd been seduced by Greg's sales pitch about Morrison and Associates being the future of construction in the county. I followed Mark to the Current, where he ordered a beer and sat alone at the bar, staring into his drink like it held the secrets of the universe. I waited 10 minutes, then sat down beside him. "Rough day?" I asked. Mark looked up, startled. "Jay, I didn't see you come in." "You looked like you had a lot on your mind. Everything okay at Morrison and Associates?" Mark's expression darkened. "You could say that. We just lost another major contract, the new shopping center on Route 9. Clients said they were concerned about our financial stability and our ability to complete the project on time." "That's tough. Any idea where they got that impression?" "Greg thinks someone's been spreading rumors about us, trying to damage our reputation." I almost choked on my beer. "Really? Any idea who would do something like that?" "He thinks it might be you, actually. Says you're trying to get revenge because of some personal issue." "Personal issue?" Mark looked uncomfortable. "Look, Jay, I know about Greg and your wife. Everyone at Morrison and Associates knows. Greg's not exactly discreet about his conquests." "His conquests?" "Yeah. Beth's not the first married woman he's been involved with. There was Sarah Henderson from the planning department, Jennifer Walsh from the county assessor's office, and at least 3 or 4 others that I know of. Guy's got a serious problem with boundaries." This was news to me, and it changed everything. Beth wasn't Greg's one true love. She was just his latest conquest. And if Mark was telling the truth, there were other women who might be very interested to know about Greg's pattern of behavior. "Mark, can I ask you something? Off the record?" "Sure." "Are you happy at Morrison and Associates?" Mark laughed bitterly. "Happy? Jay, we haven't gotten a paycheck in 3 weeks. Greg keeps saying it's a temporary cash flow problem, but half the crew is looking for other work. The company's falling apart. What would you say if I told you Parish Electrical might have some openings in the near future?" Mark's eyes lit up. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely serious. We're expanding and we need experienced project managers. Someone with your skills and reputation could write his own ticket." "What about Greg? He's not going to be happy if I jump ship." "Let me worry about Greg. You worry about taking care of your family." I bought Mark another beer and spent the next hour listening to him describe the chaos at Morrison and Associates. Missed timelines, angry clients, unpaid suppliers, employees quitting without notice. It was worse than I'd imagined. Greg Stanton wasn't just trying to steal my company. He was desperately trying to save his own. By the time I left the Current, I had a complete picture of Morrison and Associates' problems and a potential ally in Mark Kowalski. More importantly, I had information about Greg's history with other women, information that could be very useful in the right hands. I drove home to find Beth's car in the driveway and the lights on in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table with a bottle of wine and a stack of papers that looked like legal documents. "Divorce papers?" I asked. "Separation agreement. My lawyer says we should try to work this out amicably." "Your lawyer? I thought your credit cards were frozen." "Greg's paying for it." "Of course he is. How generous of him to pay for your divorce from the husband you're cheating on him with." Beth's face flushed red. "It's not like that." "What's it like, Beth?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Greg Stanton is using you to destroy my company while he juggles 3 other affairs and his own business falls apart around him." "That's not true." "Which part? The part about the other women? Or the part about Morrison and Associates being 3 weeks behind on payroll?" Beth's face went pale. "How do you know about—" "I know a lot of things, Beth. I know that Greg's been cheating on his wife with at least 4 other women besides you. I know that his company is on the verge of bankruptcy, and I know that you're not his girlfriend. You're just his latest mark in a long-running con game." "You're lying." "Am I? Call him right now. Ask him about Sarah Henderson. or Jennifer Walsh, or any of the other women he's been screwing while he's been screwing you. Beth stared at me for a long moment, then picked up her phone. I could hear it ringing, then Greg's voice. Beth, what's wrong? Greg, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Have there been other women? There was a long pause. What are you talking about? Jay says you've been having affairs with other married women. He mentioned Sarah Henderson and Jennifer Walsh. Another pause, longer this time. Beth, your husband is trying to cause trouble between us. You can't believe anything he says. So it's not true? Of course it's not true. I love you, Beth. You're the only woman I want to be with. Beth looked at me triumphantly, but I just smiled and held up my phone. I'd been recording the conversation, and I had something Greg didn't know I had. Sarah Henderson's phone number. I dialed it while Beth watched. Sarah, this is Jay Parish. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you about Greg Stanton. Oh, God. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Has he told his wife about us? Beth's face crumpled like a house of cards. Sarah, I'm going to put you on speakerphone. I want you to tell the woman I'm with about your relationship with Greg Stanton. Who is she? Someone who deserves to know the truth. For the next 10 minutes, Sarah Henderson told Beth exactly what kind of man Greg Stanton really was. The lies, the promises, the other women, the way he'd dropped her the moment she'd become inconvenient. By the time Sarah finished talking, Beth was crying so hard she could barely breathe. After I hung up, Beth looked at me with something that might have been respect. How long have you known? She asked. I found out today, but I suspected Greg wasn't the man you thought he was. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? She shook her head. Probably not. Beth, I'm not the enemy here. Greg Stanton is using you to destroy my company so he can steal my clients and save his own failing business. He doesn't love you. He's using you. I know that now. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Beth wiped her eyes and looked at the separation agreement on the table. I don't know. I've made such a mess of everything. Yes, you have. But it's not too late to make it right. She looked up at me with hope in her eyes. What do you mean? I mean it's time to turn the tables on Greg Stanton, and you're going to help me do it. Friday morning, Beth and I sat in my office at Parish Electrical, planning Greg Stanton's professional destruction. It felt surreal. 12 hours earlier, she'd been my cheating wife, plotting against me with her lover. Now she was my co-conspirator, armed with inside information about Morrison and Associates and a burning desire for revenge against the man who'd used her. Greg's got a board meeting Monday morning, Beth said, reviewing her notes. He's going to present a proposal to acquire Parish Electrical through a hostile takeover. He's been telling the board that your company is financially unstable and that you're facing multiple safety violations. What kind of hostile takeover? He's going to offer your clients better rates and faster service if they switch to Morrison and Associates. Then he'll claim that Parish Electrical is losing market share and offer to buy you out at below market value. Except Morrison and Associates doesn't have the money for a hostile takeover. No, but Greg's been negotiating with a private equity firm. They're willing to fund the acquisition if Greg can prove that Parish Electrical is vulnerable. I leaned back in my chair, impressed despite myself. It's actually a decent plan. If it worked, Greg would get my client list, my reputation, and my assets, all while making himself look like a savior to his investors. There's just one problem, Beth said with a grim smile. Greg's been lying to everyone, his board, his investors, his employees, and me. Morrison and Associates isn't just struggling, it's dying, and I've got the financial records to prove it. She pulled out a thumb drive and plugged it into my computer. I copied everything before I left his office yesterday. Bank statements, loan documents, client contracts, payroll records, everything. Greg's been cooking the books for months, hiding losses, and inflating revenue projections. The numbers were staggering. Morrison and Associates was over $2 million in debt, had defaulted on 3 major loans, and had been sued by 6 different suppliers for non-payment. Greg had been juggling payments and hiding losses for almost a year, but the house of cards was about to collapse. Jesus Christ, Beth. How did you get access to all this? Greg gave me his passwords months ago, said he trusted me completely, and wanted me to help him with strategic planning. I thought he was including me in important business decisions. Turns out he just needed someone to help him falsify documents. Have you been helping him cook the books? No, but I've been helping him prepare presentations that I now realize were full of lies. The investors think Morrison and Associates is profitable and growing. The board thinks the company is expanding into new markets. None of it's true. Carl walked into the office with a cup of coffee and a satisfied expression. The OSHA inspector filed his report. Parish Electrical received a perfect safety rating, and Peterson noted in his report that the complaint appeared to be malicious and unfounded. Good. What else? I've been making calls to Greg's former employees, the ones who quit Morrison and Associates over the past 6 months. Turns out they've got some interesting stories about unpaid wages, unsafe working conditions, and clients who never received the work they paid for. Anyone willing to go on record? 3 of them. They're pissed off enough about their unpaid wages that they'd love to see Greg get what's coming to him. Beth looked up from the financial documents. There's something else you should know. Greg's been using Morrison and Associates credit cards for personal expenses, hotel rooms, restaurants, gifts for his various girlfriends. I've got receipts going back 6 months. That's embezzlement. It gets worse. He's been billing clients for work that was never completed, then using the money to pay other debts. The Riverside Shopping Center project? They paid Morrison and Associates $150,000 up front. Greg spent it on other projects and never ordered the materials. I stared at the computer screen, trying to process what I was seeing. Greg Stanton wasn't just a cheating bastard who'd tried to steal my wife and my company. He was a criminal who'd been defrauding clients and investors for months. Beth, why are you showing me this? Yesterday you were ready to help him destroy me. Because I'm not a criminal, Jay. I thought Greg was a successful businessman who saw potential in me. I thought he loved me and wanted to build a future together. I was wrong about everything, but I'm not wrong about this. What he's been doing is illegal, and people are going to get hurt if he's not stopped. What do you want me to do with this information? I want you to destroy him, completely and publicly. I want everyone to know what kind of man Greg Stanton really is. I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. The woman I'd married. The woman who had principles and integrity and wouldn't stand by while innocent people got hurt. All right, I said. Let's destroy Greg Stanton. The plan we came up with was elegant in its simplicity. On Monday morning, while Greg was presenting his hostile takeover proposal to his board, I would be presenting evidence of his crimes to the district attorney, the state attorney general's office, and the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Simultaneously, Beth would be delivering copies of the financial records to Morrison and Associates investors, their bank, and their insurance company. But first, we had some preliminary work to do. Saturday morning, I drove to the office of Linda Stanton, Greg's wife. She was a prominent attorney who specialized in corporate law, and she had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and completely intolerant of ethical violations. Her office was in one of those converted Victorian houses that downtown lawyers love, all hardwood floors and oriental rugs and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Linda Stanton was exactly what I'd expected. 50 years old, impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp intelligence that could cut glass. Mr. Parish, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I understand you have information about my husband's business practices. I do. But first, I want you to know that I'm not here to hurt you or your family. I'm here because your husband has been committing crimes, and I think you deserve to know about it. I showed her the financial documents, the evidence of embezzlement, and the proof that Greg had been defrauding clients and investors. I did not show her the photos of Greg and Beth in bed together. Linda Stanton was about to lose her husband and her reputation, and I saw no reason to add personal humiliation to her professional devastation. Linda reviewed the documents with the focused attention of a prosecutor examining evidence. When she was finished, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "At least a year, possibly longer." "And you're certain this information is accurate?" "The documents came from Morrison & Associates' own files. Everything can be verified through bank records and client contracts." Linda opened her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been gratitude. "Mr. Parish, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is my husband having an affair?" I hesitated for a moment, then decided she deserved the truth. "Yes. With my wife, among others." "I see. And you're not here for revenge?" "I'm here for justice. Your husband tried to destroy my company and my reputation through illegal means. He's been stealing money from clients and investors, and he's been using his position to manipulate and exploit vulnerable women." Linda nodded slowly. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to protect yourself. File for divorce immediately, separate your assets from his, and consider cooperating with the authorities when they investigate Morrison & Associates." "And in return?" "In return, I make sure your name stays out of the criminal investigation. As far as anyone knows, you were completely unaware of your husband's activities." Linda Stanton was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the street below. Finally, she turned back to me. "Mr. Parish, I've been married to Greg for 18 years. I've built my career and my reputation while he's been building his company. If what you're telling me is true, then everything I've worked for could be destroyed by association with his crimes. That's why I'm here, to give you a chance to get out before the house falls down. What's your timeline?" "Monday morning. That's when everything becomes public." Linda picked up her phone and dialed her secretary. "Cancel all my appointments for the rest of the weekend. I have some emergency legal work to do." After I left Linda's office, I drove to the Morrison & Associates building. It was Saturday afternoon, and the parking lot was empty except for Greg's Mercedes. I parked across the street and waited. At 4:30, Greg came out of the building carrying a box of files and looking like a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. He loaded the box into his car and drove away, heading in the direction of the industrial park where Morrison & Associates stored their equipment. I followed him at a distance, curious about what he was doing on a Saturday afternoon. He pulled into the storage facility and parked behind a large warehouse. I waited 5 minutes, then drove past the entrance and saw Greg loading boxes into a dumpster behind the building. He was destroying evidence. I parked down the street and called Carl. "I need you to meet me at the Morrison & Associates storage facility. Bring a camera and some work gloves." "What's going on?" "Greg Stanton is destroying documents. I want to know what he's throwing away." Carl arrived 20 minutes later with his camera and a pair of industrial gloves. We waited until Greg left, then approached the dumpster. It was full of shredded documents, computer hard drives, and what looked like client files. "Jesus," Carl muttered, photographing the contents. "He's destroying everything." "Not everything. Beth already copied the financial records, and I've got backups of everything important. But this proves that Greg knows he's in trouble, and he's trying to cover his tracks." We spent an hour documenting the contents of the dumpster and retrieving what intact documents we could find. Most of it was shredded beyond recognition, but there were enough fragments to show that Greg had been destroying client contracts, financial records, and correspondence with investors. Sunday morning, I met with District Attorney Margaret Walsh at her home. Walsh was a tough prosecutor who'd built her reputation going after white-collar criminals, and she was known for her thorough investigations and high conviction rate. "Mr. Parish, I've reviewed the documents you sent me, and I have to say, this is one of the most comprehensive cases of business fraud I've seen in years. How did you obtain this information?" through a confidential source who had legitimate access to Morrison and Associates files. Are you willing to testify about what you've observed? Absolutely. I've also got 3 former Morrison and Associates employees who are willing to testify about unpaid wages and fraudulent billing practices. What about the document destruction you witnessed yesterday? I've got photographs and video evidence. Carl Morrison was with me and can corroborate everything. Walsh made notes as I talked, asking detailed questions about dates, amounts, and specific incidents. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Mr. Parish, I think we've got enough evidence to obtain search warrants for Morrison and Associates offices, Greg Stanton's home, and their storage facilities. I'll have arrest warrants prepared for Monday morning. What charges? Embezzlement, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and probably a few others once we dig deeper into the evidence. Mr. Stanton is looking at serious prison time. Sunday evening, Beth and I had dinner at a quiet restaurant outside of town. It was the first time we'd eaten together in months, and it felt strange, like we were old friends catching up rather than a married couple planning their divorce. Are you nervous about tomorrow? She asked. No, are you? Terrified. I keep thinking about all the people who are going to be hurt when this comes out. Greg's employees, his wife, his kids. They're going to be hurt worse if Greg continues stealing money and defrauding clients. At least this way, the damage stops now. Beth nodded, but she still looked troubled. Jay, I need to ask you something. After this is over, after the divorce is final, do you think we can be friends? I don't know, Beth. You hurt me more than I thought it was possible to be hurt. I don't know if I can get past that. I understand. But I want you to know that I'm grateful for what you're doing. You could have just destroyed me along with Greg, but you didn't. You gave me a chance to make things right. Everyone deserves a second chance, even people who cheat on their spouses and try to steal their companies. Beth smiled sadly. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful for it anyway. Monday morning came with the kind of crisp autumn weather that makes you believe in new beginnings. I was at my office by 6 a.m., reviewing my notes and preparing for what I knew would be a very interesting day. At 8:30, my phone rang. It was District Attorney Walsh. Mr. Parish, we've executed search warrants at Morrison and Associates and Greg Stanton's home. We've also arrested Mr. Stanton on charges of embezzlement and fraud. How did he take it? About as well as you'd expect. He's demanding to see his lawyer and claiming that he's being framed by a business rival. That would be me, I assume? He mentioned your name several times, but don't worry. We've got enough evidence to convict him without your testimony, though we'll probably need you to testify anyway. At 9:15, Carl burst into my office with a huge grin on his face. Turn on Channel 7. You're going to love this. The local news was broadcasting live from the Morrison and Associates office building, showing FBI agents carrying boxes of evidence out of the building while Greg Stanton was led away in handcuffs. The reporter was explaining that Stanton had been arrested on charges of embezzling over $2 million from clients and investors. In a related development, the reporter continued, Parish Electrical, a local contractor that Morrison and Associates had been trying to acquire, has been cleared of all safety violations and financial irregularities. Sources close to the investigation say that Parish Electrical's owner, James Parish, provided crucial evidence that led to Stanton's arrest. My phone started ringing immediately. Clients, suppliers, employees, and reporters all wanted to know what was happening. I spent the morning fielding calls and explaining that Parish Electrical had been the victim of a malicious campaign by a competitor who was now facing serious criminal charges. By noon, the story had spread throughout the county's business community. Morrison and Associates' remaining employees were looking for new jobs, their clients were scrambling to find new contractors, and their investors were demanding answers about their lost money. At 2 p.m., Beth called me from the district attorney's office. It's over, she said. I've given them everything, all the financial records, all the evidence of Greg's fraud, everything. They say I won't be charged because I cooperated fully and because there's no evidence that I knew about the criminal activity. How do you feel? Relieved, exhausted, grateful. Jay, I can't thank you enough for giving me the chance to do the right thing. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get through the divorce. About that, I've been thinking. I don't want anything from you. The house, the savings accounts, the investments. You can keep all of it. I just want a clean break and a chance to start over. Beth, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I destroyed our marriage and tried to destroy your company. The least I can do is make the divorce as easy as possible. That evening, I sat in my office reviewing the events of the past week. Greg Stanton was in jail, facing decades in prison. Morrison and Associates was finished, their assets frozen, and their reputation destroyed. Beth and I were getting divorced, but we were doing it civilly and without the bitterness that had characterized our marriage for the past year. Most importantly, Parish Electrical was not only intact, but stronger than ever. 3 of Morrison and Associates' biggest clients had already called to discuss switching their contracts to us. Mark Kowalski and 2 other experienced electricians had asked about job opportunities. And the publicity from exposing Greg's crimes had actually enhanced our reputation as an honest, reliable contractor. Carl knocked on my door and walked in with 2 beers. Thought you might need this? Thanks. Hell of a week. Hell of a week. You know I've got to hand it to you, Jay. When you set out to destroy someone, you don't mess around. I didn't set out to destroy anyone. I set out to protect what we'd built. Same thing, in the end. Greg Stanton tried to steal our company and our reputation. Now he's going to prison. His company is finished, and we're busier than we've ever been. I took a long drink of beer and looked out the window at the parking lot, where our trucks were lined up like soldiers ready for battle. Tomorrow, those trucks would roll out to job sites all over the county, carrying skilled electricians who took pride in their work and their company. Carl, do you think I went too far? With Greg? Hell no. The bastard was stealing money from clients and trying to frame us for safety violations. He got exactly what he deserved. What about Beth? Carl was quiet for a moment. That's harder to answer. She made her choice when she decided to cheat on you and help Greg try to steal the company. But she also made the right choice in the end, when she helped you expose his crimes. I guess that counts for something. I keep thinking about what she said, about us being friends after the divorce is final. You want to be friends with her? I don't know. Part of me still loves her, Carl. Part of me always will. But I don't know if I can trust her again. Trust takes time to rebuild. Maybe someday you two can be friends, but right now you need to focus on moving forward. Carl was right. I'd spent the past week looking backward, trying to understand how my marriage had fallen apart and my business had come under attack. Now it was time to look forward, to rebuild my personal life and continue growing the company that Carl and I had spent 15 years building. 3 weeks after Greg Stanton's arrest, I thought the worst was behind me. Parish Electrical was busier than ever, with new clients calling daily and our reputation stronger than it had been in years. Beth had moved out of the house and into an apartment across town, and we were proceeding with an amicable divorce. Greg was in jail awaiting trial, and Morrison and Associates had officially closed its doors. I should have known it was too good to last. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing bids for the new hospital expansion project. It was Detective Ray Morrison from the County Sheriff's Department, no relation to Carl, despite the name. Mr. Parish, I need to speak with you about the Morrison and Associates investigation. Can you come down to the station this afternoon? Is there a problem? Just some follow-up questions, nothing to worry about. But I was worried. In my experience, when cops say there's nothing to worry about, it's time to start worrying. I called my lawyer, David Chen, and asked him to meet me at the sheriff's department. Chen was a sharp criminal defense attorney who'd handled a few legal issues for Parish Electrical over the years, and I trusted his judgment. Jay, what's this about? Chen asked as we walked into the station. I have no idea. I thought the Morrison and Associates case was closed. Detective Morrison was a thin, intense man in his 40s with the kind of eyes that missed nothing. He led us into an interview room and spread a file folder across the table. Mr. Parish, we've been investigating some irregularities in the Morrison and Associates case, and your name has come up in connection with several incidents. What kind of incidents? Let's start with the OSHA complaint against your company. We have evidence that you knew the complaint was false when it was filed. Of course I knew it was false. My company has an exemplary safety record. But you didn't report it as a false complaint. Instead, you used it as evidence that Greg Stanton was trying to damage your reputation. Chen leaned forward. Detective, filing a false OSHA complaint is a crime. Defending against a false complaint is not. Fair enough, but what about this? Morrison pulled out a photograph of Greg Stanton's car with slashed tires. This was taken in the Morrison and Associates parking lot 3 weeks ago. Several witnesses saw a truck matching the description of your vehicle in the area around the time the tires were slashed. I never slashed anyone's tires. What about the incident at the Marriott Hotel? You called the front desk claiming to be a police officer and reported suspicious activity in room 247. That's impersonating a police officer, Mr. Parish. I felt my stomach drop. I never claimed to be a police officer. I said I was Detective Morrison, but I never said I was with the police. You said you were Detective Morrison with the County Sheriff's Department. Chen put his hand on my arm. Don't say anything else, Jay. But Detective Morrison wasn't finished. We also have reports that you've been harassing Morrison and Associates employees, following Mr. Stanton to various locations, and making threatening phone calls. Those are lies. Are they? We have phone records showing multiple calls from your number to Morrison and Associates employees. We have witness statements placing you at locations where Mr. Stanton was conducting business. And we have security camera footage of you following Mr. Stanton to the industrial storage facility where he was disposing of documents. Chen stood up. This interview is over. My client isn't saying another word without a formal agreement about immunity. Mr. Parish isn't under arrest, Morrison said. Yet. But I'd advise him to think carefully about his recent activities. Vigilante justice is still illegal, even when the target is a criminal. Outside the sheriff's department, Chen pulled me aside. Jay, what the hell have you been doing? Did you slash Greg Stanton's tires? No, but I did follow him a few times, and I did call the hotel pretending to be a cop, but I never threatened anyone or broke any laws. You impersonated a police officer. That's a felony. I said I was Detective Morrison. I never said I was with the police. That's a semantic distinction that won't hold up in court. Jay, you need to tell me everything you've done in the past month. Every phone call, every surveillance operation, every act of revenge against Greg Stanton or anyone else. I spent the next hour telling Chen about my campaign against Greg and Beth, the security cameras, the financial investigation, the gossip campaign, the hotel incident, following Greg to various locations. When I was finished, Chen looked like he wanted to strangle me. Jesus Christ, Jay. You've been conducting a one-man investigation and harassment campaign. Do you realize how much trouble you could be in? I was protecting my company and my reputation. You were breaking the law, multiple laws, and now the police are investigating you instead of focusing on Greg Stanton's crimes. What do you think they'll do? Best case scenario? They'll decide not to file charges because you cooperated with the fraud investigation and because Greg Stanton is a bigger fish. Worst case scenario? You're looking at charges for impersonating a police officer, harassment, stalking, and possibly conspiracy. Conspiracy? If they can prove that you and Beth worked together to entrap Greg Stanton, they might argue that you conspired to commit fraud or extortion. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. What about Beth? Is she in trouble too? Probably. If they're investigating you, they're investigating her too. That evening, I called Beth to warn her about the police investigation. She answered on the first ring, and I could hear the stress in her voice. Jay, thank God you called. 2 detectives came to my apartment this afternoon asking questions about our divorce, about Greg, about everything that happened. They wanted to know if we'd planned the whole thing together. What did you tell them? The truth. That I didn't know about Greg's crimes until you showed me the evidence. That I cooperated with the investigation because it was the right thing to do. But Jay, they didn't believe me. They think we set Greg up together. Did you call a lawyer? I can't afford a lawyer. My savings are gone, and I'm barely making enough at my new job to pay rent. What new job? I'm working at a dental office, answering phones and filing insurance claims. It's all I could find after Morrison and Associates collapsed and my reputation was destroyed. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Beth had made terrible choices, but she'd also paid a heavy price for them. Her career was ruined, her financial security was gone, and now she was facing potential criminal charges. Beth, I'll pay for a lawyer for you. You need legal representation. Jay, you don't have to. Yes, I do. We're in this together, whether we like it or not. The next morning, I met with Chen and Margaret Walsh, the district attorney who'd prosecuted Greg Stanton. Walsh was not happy. Mr. Parish, I'm disappointed in you. You provided valuable evidence in the Morrison and Associates case, but you also conducted your own investigation using methods that were questionable at best and illegal at worst. I was protecting my company. You were taking the law into your own hands. Do you realize that your actions could jeopardize the case against Greg Stanton? If his lawyers can prove that evidence was obtained through illegal surveillance or harassment, they might be able to get it thrown out. Chen leaned forward. Margaret, what are you looking for here? Jay cooperated fully with your investigation. He provided evidence that led to the arrest and conviction of a major fraud case. Are you really going to prosecute him for impersonating a police officer and following someone around? That depends on what else we find. We're still investigating Mr. Parish's activities, and we're still interviewing witnesses. If we find evidence of more serious crimes, we'll prosecute accordingly. What kind of serious crimes? Extortion, for one. If Mr. Parish threatened Greg Stanton or demanded money in exchange for not releasing embarrassing information, that's extortion. I never demanded money from anyone. What about when you showed Greg Stanton the photos of him and your wife? What did you want in return for not releasing them? I wanted him to leave my wife alone and stop trying to destroy my company. That sounds like extortion to me. Chen shook his head. Margaret, you're reaching. Jay had every right to confront the man who was sleeping with his wife and trying to steal his business. Showing someone evidence of their own misconduct isn't extortion. We'll see what a jury thinks. The meeting ended with no resolution, but I could see that Walsh was under pressure to prosecute someone. Greg Stanton was already in jail, but the investigation had uncovered a web of misconduct that went beyond simple fraud. The media was demanding accountability, and Walsh needed to show that she was taking all aspects of the case seriously. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation intensified. Detectives interviewed my employees, my neighbors, my clients, and anyone else who might have information about my activities during the period when I was investigating Greg and Beth. They subpoenaed my phone records, my computer files, and my financial records. The media attention was brutal. The local newspaper ran a series of articles about vigilante justice and private citizens taking the law into their own hands. My photo appeared on the front page under headlines like Contractor Under Investigation and Parish Electrical Owner Accused of Harassment. The damage to my reputation was immediate and severe. 3 clients canceled their contracts with Parish Electrical, citing concerns about my legal troubles. 2 of my best electricians quit to take jobs with competitors. The bank called to review my business loans, and my insurance company sent investigators to assess my risk profile. Carl tried to keep the company running while I dealt with the legal issues, but it was an uphill battle. Every day brought new problems, new complications, new evidence that my campaign against Greg Stanton was destroying everything I'd worked to build. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon when Detective Morrison called to inform me that I was being charged with impersonating a police officer, harassment, and stalking. "Mr. Parish, you need to turn yourself in by 5 p.m. today. Bond has been set at $50,000. I hung up the phone and stared out the window at the Parish electrical parking lot, where our trucks sat idle because we didn't have enough work to keep them busy. In 3 weeks, I'd gone from successful businessman to criminal defendant. My marriage was over, my company was struggling, and my reputation was in ruins. Chen met me at the courthouse with a bail bondsman and a grim expression. "Jay, I'm not going to lie to you. This is bad. The prosecutor is treating this like a major case, and the media attention is making everything worse. What are my options? We can fight the charges and hope for the best, or we can negotiate a plea bargain that might include jail time but would end the media circus. What do you recommend?" "Fight. The charges are weak, and the prosecutor is overreaching, but it's going to be expensive, and it's going to take months to resolve." I posted bail and went home to an empty house that felt like a mausoleum. Beth's belongings were gone, her presence erased from every room. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the back porch, looking out at the garden Beth had planted years ago. The roses were still blooming, their red petals bright against the darkening sky. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely wasted on a man who'd lost everything that mattered to him. My phone rang. It was Beth. "Jay, I heard about the charges. I'm so sorry. Are you being charged too?" "Not yet, but my lawyer thinks it's just a matter of time. Jay, I need to tell you something. The police asked me if you'd ever threatened Greg or demanded money from him." "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That you never threatened anyone or demanded money. But Jay, they have recordings." "What kind of recordings?" "Phone conversations between you and Greg. Someone was recording your calls, and the police have copies." I felt the world tilt on its axis. "Who was recording our calls?" "I don't know, but my lawyer thinks it might have been Greg himself. He might have been recording conversations as insurance against exactly this kind of situation." "Have you heard the recordings?" "No, but my lawyer has. He says they're bad, Jay. Really bad." After Beth hung up, I sat on the porch for another hour, trying to process what she'd told me. If Greg had been recording our phone conversations, then the police had evidence of everything I'd said to him, including some things that might sound like threats when taken out of context. I called Chen and told him about the recordings. "Jesus, Jay, why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" "I didn't know the conversations were being recorded." "What exactly did you say to Greg Stanton?" "I don't remember exactly. I was angry, and I said some things that I probably shouldn't have said." "Did you threaten him?" "I told him that if he didn't leave my wife alone and stop trying to destroy my company, he'd regret it." "That's a threat, Jay. It was a warning. In the eyes of the law, there's no difference." The next morning, Chen called with more bad news. The district attorney had added extortion charges to the list, based on the recorded phone conversations. If convicted on all charges, I was looking at up to 10 years in prison. "Jay, we need to seriously consider a plea bargain. The prosecutor is offering 2 years in prison in exchange for guilty pleas on all charges." 2 years? It's better than 10, and it would end this nightmare for you and your company. I thought about Carl, trying to hold Parish Electrical together while I fought criminal charges. I thought about my employees, wondering if they'd have jobs next month. I thought about the clients who'd trusted me with their projects and were now questioning my integrity. What happens to my company if I go to prison? Carl would have to buy you out or find new investors. Either way, Parish Electrical would survive, but it would never be the same. That afternoon, I drove to the county jail to visit Greg Stanton. I wanted to look him in the eye and ask him why he'd recorded our conversations. The visit had to be approved by his lawyer and mine, and it took 3 days to arrange. Greg looked terrible. Prison orange didn't suit him, and he'd lost weight. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed desperation of a man who'd lost everything. Jay, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to ask you about the phone recordings. Greg's face flushed red. My lawyer told me not to discuss that. Your lawyer isn't here, it's just you and me. What do you want to know? Why did you record our conversations? Greg was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Finally, he looked up at me with something that might have been regret. Because I knew you were going to destroy me. From the moment you found out about Beth and me, I knew you'd never let it go. I thought if I had recordings of you threatening me, I could use them as leverage. Leverage for what? To make you back off. To protect myself and my company. Your company was already finished. You'd been stealing money for months. I was trying to save it. Everything I did, the affair with Beth, the plan to acquire Parish Electrical, the financial manipulations, it was all to save Morrison and Associates. You destroyed innocent people's lives to save a company that was already over. Just like you destroyed my life to save yours. I stared at Greg across the metal table, separated by bulletproof glass, and realized that he was right. In our war against each other, we'd both become the kind of men we'd once despised. He'd become a criminal, and I'd become a vigilante. Neither of us was the hero of this story. Greg, I want you to know something. I never set out to destroy you. I just wanted to protect what was mine. I know, and I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. When I started the affair with Beth, I thought it would just be a fling. When I started planning the acquisition, I thought it was just business. I never wanted to hurt you personally. But you did. Yeah, I did. We sat in silence for a moment, two men who'd destroyed each other's lives over pride and greed and the illusion of control. Greg, the recordings. Will you testify that I never actually threatened you? I can't. My lawyer says if I help you, it could hurt my own case. Your case is already lost. You're going to prison for 20 years minimum. I know, but I still have to protect what little I have left. I left the jail feeling empty and defeated. Greg Stanton was going to prison for his crimes, but he was taking me down with him. In the end, we'd both lost everything that mattered to us. The trial was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, Parish Electrical continued to struggle. My reputation remained in ruins, and my marriage officially ended when Beth and I signed the divorce papers in a lawyer's office that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Jay, I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything you did for me, Beth said as we left the courthouse. You could have destroyed me along with Greg, but you didn't. You gave me a chance to do the right thing. It doesn't matter now. We're both facing criminal charges, and our lives are ruined anyway. Maybe. But at least we're facing them with our integrity intact. I wasn't sure about that. My integrity felt pretty compromised by the lies I'd told, the laws I'd broken, and the lives I'd helped destroy. But Beth was trying to find meaning in our mutual destruction, and I didn't have the heart to take that away from her. 3 days before the trial was scheduled to begin, Chen called with news that changed everything. Jay, Greg Stanton is gone. What? Suicide. He hanged himself in his cell last night. Left a note confessing to everything and stating that you never threatened him or committed any crimes. I sat down heavily in my office chair, trying to process what Chen had told me. Greg Stanton was gone, and with him went the primary witness against me. What does this mean for my case? It means the charges are going to be dropped. Without Greg's testimony and with his confession exonerating you, the prosecutor has no case. What about the recordings? Greg's confession states that he edited the recordings to make your comments sound more threatening than they actually were. He also admits that he recorded the conversations without your knowledge, which makes them inadmissible anyway. I should have felt relieved, but all I felt was empty. Greg Stanton was gone, His company was destroyed, his family was ruined, and his employees were scattered to the wind. I was free, but the victory felt hollow. Jay, are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Chen, what happens now? Now you rebuild your life and your company. The charges are dropped, your reputation is cleared, and you can move forward. But I wasn't sure I wanted to move forward. The past 6 months had shown me things about myself that I didn't like. My capacity for revenge, my willingness to bend the law, my ability to rationalize almost any action in the name of protecting what was mine. I called Carl and told him about Greg's death and the dropped charges. Jesus, Jay, how do you feel? I don't know. Empty, I guess. Sad. Greg Stanton was a bastard, but he didn't deserve to die. Maybe not. But he made his choices just like you made yours. The difference is you're still alive to learn from your mistakes. What mistakes? I protected our company, exposed a criminal, and saved our clients from being defrauded. You also broke the law, destroyed your marriage, and nearly went to prison. And for what? To prove that you were tougher than Greg Stanton? Carl was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. I did what I had to do. No, you did what you wanted to do. There's a difference. That evening I drove to Greg Stanton's funeral. It was held at a small church on the outskirts of town, attended by maybe 30 people, his wife, his children, a few former employees, and some family members. I sat in the back, watching Linda Stanton try to comfort her 2 teenage kids while dealing with her own grief and humiliation. The minister spoke about forgiveness and redemption, about the complexity of human nature and the danger of judging others too harshly. He didn't mention Greg's crimes or the circumstances of his death, but everyone in the church knew the story. After the service, Linda Stanton approached me in the parking lot. Mr. Parish, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to pay my respects. Whatever else happened, Greg didn't deserve to die. No, he didn't. But he couldn't live with what he'd done, and he couldn't face the consequences of his actions. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Stanton, and I'm sorry for my part in what happened. Linda studied my face for a moment, then nodded. We all played a part, Mr. Parish. Greg, you, your wife, me, we all made choices that led to this moment. The question is, what we do now. What are you going to do? I'm going to take my children and move somewhere else. Start over. Try to build a life that isn't defined by my husband's crimes or my own failures. What about your law practice? Finished. No one's going to hire the wife of a convicted embezzler, even if she had nothing to do with his crimes. But that's okay. I've been practicing law for 20 years and I'm tired of it anyway. Linda Stanton got in her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the church parking lot with the weight of my own choices pressing down on me like a lead blanket. 2 weeks later, Parish Electrical was back to full capacity. The dropped charges had restored my reputation, and clients were calling daily with new projects. Carl had hired back the electricians who'd quit, and we were busier than we'd been in years. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd won the war by becoming someone I didn't recognize. The man who'd started this fight 6 months ago had been motivated by love for his wife and pride in his company. The man who'd finished it was motivated by revenge and a desire to prove his dominance over his enemies. Beth called me on a Thursday afternoon to tell me she was leaving town. I got a job in Denver, she said. Office manager for a small construction company. It's not much, but it's a fresh start. When are you leaving? Tomorrow. Jay, I wanted to call and say goodbye and to thank you again for everything you did. I didn't do it for you, Beth. I did it for me. I know, but you still could have destroyed me and you didn't. That means something. Does it? Because I'm not sure I'm the good guy in this story. You're not the bad guy either. You're just a man who was pushed too far and fought back the only way you knew how. Greg Stanton is gone, Beth. His company is destroyed, his family is ruined, and his employees lost their jobs. All because he tried to steal my wife and my business. Greg Stanton is gone because he couldn't live with the consequences of his own actions. That's not your fault, Jay. Isn't it? No. Greg made his choices long before you found out about the affair. He chose to embezzle money, to defraud clients, to destroy his own company. You just exposed what he'd already done. After Beth hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the Parish electrical parking lot, where our trucks were lined up like soldiers ready for battle. Tomorrow, those trucks would roll out to job sites all over the county, carrying skilled electricians who took pride in their work and their company. I'd saved Parish Electrical, but I'd lost everything else that mattered to me. My marriage was over, my reputation was tainted by scandal, and my sense of myself as a good man was shattered beyond repair. Carl knocked on my door and walked in with 2 beers. Thought you might need this. Thanks. Carl, do you think I'm a good man? That's a hell of a question. Why do you ask? Because I'm not sure anymore. I've spent the past 6 months lying, manipulating people, breaking the law, and destroying lives. Good men don't do those things. Good men protect what they love. Sometimes that requires doing things that aren't pretty. Greg Stanton thought he was protecting what he loved too. Carl was quiet for a moment, considering that. Maybe, but there's a difference between protecting what you've built honestly and stealing what belongs to someone else. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like we're all just animals fighting over territory. Maybe we are, but some animals fight fair and some don't. You fought fair, Jay. You used Greg's own crimes against him. You didn't plant evidence or make false accusations. Everything you exposed was true. I still destroyed a man's life. He destroyed his own life. You just made sure everyone knew about it. That night, I drove to the house I'd shared with Beth for 12 years. It was empty now, echoing with the ghosts of better times. I walked through the rooms, remembering the life we'd built together and the dreams we'd shared. In the bedroom, I found a photo that Beth had left behind, our wedding picture, taken on a perfect autumn day when we'd believed in forever and happily ever after. We looked so young and hopeful, so certain that love would conquer all. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the man I'd been then with the man I'd become. 12 years ago, I'd promised to love and protect Beth for the rest of my life. I'd kept that promise, even when she'd betrayed me. But in protecting her from Greg Stanton's manipulation, I'd also destroyed the possibility of any future relationship between us. The next morning, I woke up alone in a house that felt like a museum of my former life. I made coffee, read the newspaper, and went to work, just like I had every day for the past 15 years. But everything felt different now, colored by the knowledge of what I was capable of when pushed to my limits. At the office, Carl was waiting with the morning's schedule and a stack of new client contracts. "Busy day," he said. "The Henderson project starts this morning. We've got 3 estimates to finish, and the hospital expansion bid is due by 5. "Sounds good." "Jay, are you okay? You seem distant." "I'm fine. Just tired." But I wasn't fine, and I wasn't just tired. I was fundamentally changed by the events of the past 6 months, and I wasn't sure if the change was for the better or worse. At lunch, I drove to Riverside Park, where I'd confronted Beth and Greg 6 months earlier. It was a beautiful day, and the park was full of families enjoying the sunshine. Children played on the swings while their parents watched from benches, and teenagers threw frisbees on the grass. I sat on the same bench where I'd shown Greg the photos of him and Beth, where I'd demanded that he admit his crimes and leave my wife alone. It seemed like a lifetime ago, but it had only been 6 months. A young couple walked past, holding hands and laughing at some private joke. They reminded me of Beth and me in the early days of our marriage, when we'd been so sure that our love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Beth's number. I stared at it for a long moment, then put the phone away without calling. She was in Denver now, starting a new life, and I had no right to intrude on that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something irreplaceable when I'd chosen revenge over reconciliation, justice over forgiveness. The sun was setting when I finally left the park and drove back to my empty house. I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the back porch, looking out at the garden Beth had planted years ago. The roses were still blooming, their red petals bright against the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that I was more than just a man who destroyed his enemies. But tonight, I was content to sit in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the ghosts of my former life and the weight of my choices. I'd won the war against Greg Stanton, but I'd lost the peace that had once defined my existence. Whether that was a victory or a defeat remained to be seen. The phone rang, interrupting my brooding. It was Carl. "Jay, turn on Channel 7. There's something you need to see." I went inside and turned on the television. The local news was running a story about Parish Electrical being awarded the contract for the new county courthouse, the biggest project in our company's history. Parish Electrical, owned by James Parish, was selected over 5 other contractors for the $12 million project, the reporter explained. Parish's company has built a reputation for quality work and ethical business practices, particularly in light of recent scandals involving competitor Morrison and Associates. I turned off the television and walked back to the porch. The courthouse project would secure Parish Electrical's future for years to come. It was the kind of success I'd dreamed of when Carl and I had started the company 15 years ago. But success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. I finished my whiskey and went inside to prepare for another day of building the future on the ruins of the past. Tomorrow, Parish Electrical would begin work on the courthouse project. Tomorrow, I would continue the process of rebuilding my reputation and my company. But tonight, I was just a man sitting alone in an empty house, wondering if the price of victory had been worth paying. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The man looking back at me was older, harder, more cynical than the one who'd started this journey 6 months ago. He was a man who'd learned that power wasn't about the electricity that flowed through wires. It was about the information you possessed and the leverage you could apply. He was a man who'd won everything he'd fought for and lost everything that had once mattered to him. He was me.